Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? Doing all right? Yeah? Yeah? Ready to talk firmware? All right, no, I think everyone's here for, yeah, they're here for firmware. Definitely not for a presidential candidate. Can you put it a little closer? A little closer. There we go. She did say to eat the microphone. Okay, so, hey everyone, my name's Matt Lousteau. I am the Vice President of Operations at Giga Energy. Formerly worked at Luxor Technologies doing firmware, so that's why I'm here talking about it. We'll go ahead and introduce the panel. Let's start at the end. Brett from Upstream Data.
Hey everyone, I'm Brett. I work at Upstream Data. I'm the lead programmer over there, and I also maintain an open source miner management software called Asic.
Hello everyone, I'm Guzmán, co-founder and chief product officer at Luxor.
Hello everybody, my name is Pavel Moravec. I'm co-founder of Braiins in the space from 2013 and hopefully long time to the future as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Marc Fresa, co-founder of Vnish, mainly doing BD these days, thankfully.
Awesome, thanks guys. So we'll start with a little intro into firmware. So there's a lot of people in the crowd I can see that definitely know what firmware is, quite a few that may not. So basically firmware is a subset of software that brings lower level hardware together with higher level software, allowing for abstractions and different ways to leverage your hardware. In the context of Bitcoin mining, it's usually developed by a third party when most people are talking about it. There's firmware that ships on the manufactured equipment, but a lot of people really enjoy and benefit from using third-party solutions. One of the main things is efficiency, but it also allows for different power strategies. So there's a lot of really good things that you can do with firmware. I've spoken to, and I actually use firmware on a daily basis myself. So we'll get into it here. And one of the interesting things that is somewhat relevant to firmware, but it's also been extremely topical in the past several months this year in the Bitcoin space is pool centralization. So one of the solutions proposed to alleviate some of the pool centralization problems is Stratum v2. What Stratum v2 does is basically two things. It allows for encrypted communications between the firmware on the miners and the pools. The other thing it allows for is block construction by the miners themselves. So, Pavel, you were one of the co-founders at Braiins, and you've done a lot of work on Stratum v2, as I understand it. Can you kind of explain the current state of Braiins and Braiins firmware as it relates to Stratum v2?
Yeah, sure. Stratum v2 is a very complicated topic, even though the promises are pretty simple. It is difficult to unpack it so that we can really talk about specifics. On the firmware level, Stratum v2 doesn't bring as much as it is promised as a whole protocol, because the biggest upsides of Stratum v2 is shifting slightly the whole ecosystem again around mining. The mining firmware itself needs to support only a subset of the protocol, allowing to efficient and secure communication. But to unlock the potential of Stratum v2 towards better decentralization, additional aspects of the ecosystem needs to be implemented. So additional software on a pool side and even the farm operation side needs to be deployed. So from firmware perspective, we do support Stratum v2 protocol a lot of years already, but the missing part mostly is the counterparty, the software on pool side and the farm operation side, which would complement the firmware aspect. So whatever you would like to dig deeper in, we can discuss, but it is a more complex topic than just firmware supporting Stratum v2 or not.
Very much so. No, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So effectively, Braiins OS, as it ships today, is compatible with any Stratum v2 pool that can operate?
Yes.
Okay.
We do run Stratum v2 protocol on Braiins OS a lot of years. There are obviously compatibility troubles which would need to be ironed out, but there is even an open source movement which tries to get into like making sure that the implementations are compatible. So we do cooperate on that as well. But yeah, it is pretty simple to support Stratum V2 on the firmware level.
Got it. Okay. So we're going to get a little spicy here. Goose, why do you think Stratum V2 isn't a great solution for the pool centralization challenge? Because we'll get back to firmware, but it's relevant to firmware in that you have to support it from a firmware level.
Yeah, of course. I think Stratum V2 is a very interesting topic and kind of like an idea, but the reality is that within our 3,000 plus miners that we have in our mining pool and hundreds of clients that we have on firmware, none of them are really requesting for Stratum V2 support. There's literally not that much product market fit. So instead, what we do is when we serve our customers, when we ask what they need us to essentially build, they're always requesting better auto-tuning, better thermal controls, quicker curtailments, quicker ramp-ups. So we try to focus like most of our engineering time on things our customers are eagering us for us to build. But yeah, I think like long-term Stratum V2 allows for kind of like decentralized block construction, better communication protocol with the pools. But like the reality is that today it's not very extensively used, as it's not something that miners are requesting in high demand.
So actually, I have a follow-up to that kind of to Brett, because Brett, you operate as a miner. You guys have some self-mining as well as kind of managing Asic as well. So like, what's stopping you from rolling out Stratum V2 in an application that you as a miner would be interested in asking the likes of Luxor, Braiins, and all the pool providers?
So the main issue there is we run almost exclusively Watts miners, so there's no aftermarket firmware for Watts miners from anyone on the stage. The closest thing is Epic, and you'd have to swap out control boards for that. So that's not really something that we can justify at this point in time. And I'm not even sure if they have Stratum V2 support. I know they have looked at it. But at the same time, like Stratum V2 is useful for a lot more things, I think, than just the pool decentralization. There's extension protocols that you can implement for all sorts of things. As a large-scale miner, you could implement them for auditing pool shares and all sorts of things. So, like I said, the main thing is essentially we don't have access to the right firmware to be able to do it.
So, and that's kind of the part of my question, though, is what's stopping you from going to Watts Miner and saying, hey, I want Stratum V2 in your stock firmware?
You think MicroBT would listen to me?
No.
I'll try it. They're right over there.
You are the proxy for the general mining public, if you understand the question. Does that make sense?
I don't think people
Be the
are...
hero.
What?
Be the hero.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
I really think the main issue there is a lot of people don't understand what the use case is for Stratum V2 for their specific application. A lot of large-scale miners, like Guzmán said, are interested in faster curtailment, better tuning algorithms, things like that. They don't really care that much about mining decentralization. They care about making a profit, which is fine. That's the whole point of being a large-scale miner. You want to make a profit. But at that scale, there's also auditing requirements. There's issues with man-in-the-middle attacks. There's all sorts of problems that can get caused when you're at a large scale like that you have to be able to mitigate. And Stratum V2 makes it simpler to solve a lot of those issues than Stratum V1, which is an unencrypted, not very extensible, not very well standardized protocol. And Stratum V2 is also smaller data packet-wise. It's using a smaller binary encrypted protocol rather than just JSON. There's a lot of little optimizations that are really helpful for large-scale miners, but it's hard for them to push it when they don't understand what exactly it can do for them, I think.
All of
Thanks
those
for great marketing.
Hey, man, I like the open source side of it.
You can also solve all of those things with a proxy, right? There's binary proxies out there that you can run at your facility level and have an encrypted communication with the mining pool, that you can also audit all of your shares, that you can get metrics, that you can get logs, that you can get dashboards, that you can switch from mining pools just with a single command without having to reconfigure all of your miners. Like all of those things can also be solved at the proxy level.
Yep.
And you don't necessarily need.
And there's an open source proxy out there. Stratum Mining / Stratum has their open source Stratum V2 mining proxy, so you can proxy from V1 to V2 and essentially do everything that Guzmán's talking about. So I'm not sure how many industrial miners are out there doing that, but that is technically a use case of Stratum V2 is also on the proxy level. It's in the spec.
Thanks for indulging me there. Mark, you may have just stole Mark's thunder, but Mark, what are your thoughts on
Well,
MVT?
I was actually about to say, I was like, there's a product, and you already had it. But I was going to say, I've been doing firmware for, 2017, 2018. And I have not had a single client ask about Stratum V2. But, I think the main benefit is literally just encryption and smaller packets. Try, if you don't have a proxy, try putting, 10,000 miners in a Starlink. Watch what happens. You're going to have a bad time. I don't think Stratum V2 will help that entirely, but there's also it's good. I'm not anything against it.
It's a good start. That's why there's extensions for it.
Like the whole block template and all that stuff, it gets pretty complicated. Also for your average user, personally.
Absolutely. No, I think this is an important conversation to have because a lot of the conversations around Stratum V2 are occurring maybe in the podcast influencer space where people are a lot less technical and maybe don't understand the hurdles that we as miners may encounter. So I wanted to kind of instigate that conversation, have a little fun with it. So you kind of just answered the other question I had for you, was like, do you have any plans? But it sounds like the echoing theme here is that there's not a resounding request for Stratum V2 from miners. And for the record, I think I had one person when I was at Luxor ask for Stratum V2. So, I'm probably encountering the same things. Pavel, do you have anything else to say? You've been a little bit quiet.
No, I don't think Stratum V2 is necessarily a thing what solves all the users' troubles. It is not, and it was never meant like this. The original idea or the motivation was solving a lot of small issues, but and it ended up having even the ground motivation of helping with the decentralization if users are obviously willing to do the work, and if they care. And Stratum V2 is not here to push anybody to care about things which you don't care about. So it's partially a false conversation in the sense that nobody forces you to use Stratum V2. So we'll see what the future will bring. We do see small steps. And I would hope myself to see a point when it just turns that there will be enough software available and support that it will be more and more to just use it and not necessarily push for it as a miner who needs to just survive halving and stuff like that.
Certainly. Well, the fact that it's here and you've developed a product and participated in development of a product, it gives us something to talk about in a way, because it's really easy to sit on the sidelines and hurl knives at the current state of things. But you guys put the effort in and put a product out there that gives us something to talk about and potentially improve upon. So kudos for that. I think it's a very important topic in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Pool centralization is a serious topic. So,
one more comment. I think it is more interesting. Surprisingly, more interesting to people outside of mining sub-ecosystem of Bitcoin than to the other people outside of mining.
Yes.
Which is interesting because it is purely technical solution to some specific issue in mining. But value-based, it is more interesting for everybody else. Because people in the mining system or mining ecosystem, they are really incentives driven. There is not so much time to think about, okay, what is the bigger picture, because I need to pay the electricity, I need to be as efficient as possible, and so on and so on and so on. The pressure on miners is very strong, so that the key stuff to solve before thinking about stuff like Stratum V2, it is a lot of other things. But once you step outside and look at the bigger picture from the Bitcoin perspective, then the topic starts to be more interesting. But then the incentives for miners themselves are are not exactly the same as looking from outside.
Well, and I think that's thematic in the Bitcoin ecosystem of talking about incentives. And so, like, it makes sense that it may not be readily apparent to miners who are very specialized on this. And so, like, it's very interesting observation that it's kind of like a motif throughout all of the Bitcoin world and looking at incentives in a very intense way to understand how that might affect economic actors, not just now, but 10, 20, 30 years from now. So, well, that's enough for Stratum V2, considering this is a firmware topic panel. So let's get into some ASIC manufacturing concepts. Bitmain and MicroBT have their own supply chains, and they're in no way beholden to third-party firmware developers. So you guys are pretty much at the mercy of whatever they decide to do. And basically, for anyone who's unaware, developing a third-party firmware requires that you circumvent the operating system that the miner ships with. That means there's a lot of work if Bitmain introduces a new hiccup. Let's start with Marc. Marc, how do you view the relationship between firmware and ASIC manufacturers?
It's a little bit of a cat and mouse game. I've heard a rumor, and I want to squash this one right off the bat, that the Bitmain and these companies give us like some inside information. I would love that, but no, that's not the case. So, it's a constant cat and mouse game. I mean, when we started with firmware publicly 2018, the first exploit for the S9 was literally uploading a file that ran one line of code that deleted a file to check for a password. That was the exploit. And from then on, it got more and more and more complex to the point where, we have guys who full-time, all they do are try to hack into these things. And that's painful for a business because, you can spend 3 months trying to find a bug and then find out that bug wasn't the bug you needed to use to get full ownership over that ASIC. And then not only that, of course, there's manufacturing changes. The miners change through different revisions. Bitmain, I'm only talking about Bitmain because that's really all I know. Between one model and a sub-model, something very small can change. This very small change can have a huge impact, and it's just a massive cat and mouse game. Relationship-wise, Bitmain, come on, help us out, but good luck with that one.
So, Pavel, what's miner? Kidding.
It's soon.
Soon. 2 weeks?
I knew the answer.
What's the proper answer? 2 weeks?
Soon. Trademarked.
We are going to be sooner.
Ooh, spicy. But seriously, so like one of the things that you guys, it looked like from the outside, it looked like you guys proposed as a potential solution to this was your own control board. I don't know I haven't actually looked at the latest there. What have you learned from that endeavor in developing your own control board?
Like it is very similar to any engineering project you run. You think at the beginning it's easy, then you realized not so much, but when you are crossing the finish line, you just understand that you were fool and you learned things you didn't expect to learn from the beginning. So, like from a hardware manufacturing perspective, we definitely learned a lot of small stuff, which at the end are key to be able to produce in a larger scale. I cannot get into like very details, but yeah, it is. I think the same as every other major engineering project. People tend to overestimate what they can do, and then they learn the lesson, and they are happy that they learned the lesson.
Got it.
I just want to share. We were working on a control board in 2021. Painful. Absolutely painful.
So all you had
revision
to do was
after revision.
So, Goose, what is Luxor doing to keep up with the ever-shifting landscape of control boards and ASIC models?
Well, I think it's same as everyone else. It's we have a great team that when we first started support for the vanilla S9 that like 95 terahashes, it took us like literally a couple of months to get it done, and now we get like test units from manufacturers, and we can add support for new machines in a day or two. So it's just becoming easier as you get repetitions, as you understand the code base. The more you do it, the better you just get at it. So now we've added support for pretty much every single air-cooled Bitmain machine. we are getting into the hydros, and hopefully next into other manufacturers like MicroVT and Watts Miners. So yeah, it's just getting units and trying to add support for our firmware. I think everyone else here is doing the same thing.
So Brett, you're mostly using Watts Miners, so like hardware changes that doesn't necessarily affect you, but like you've already kind of mentioned you're not really using third-party firmware for much of your operation, but if it does change and like let's say there's something that's no longer supported, like how detrimental is that to your operation when it comes to keeping up with the changes?
It's not particularly detrimental. Like there's a lot of issues with stock firmware in general, so yeah, like it's not.
It's job security.
Sorry?
It's job security.
Yeah. it keeps me busy.
Okay. So we'll jump into one of the topics you specifically requested. So API conventions, right? For the uninitiated, APIs are the commands that you use to interface with the firmware. Basically, it's how you interact. It's how you sleep, wake up, tune, anything you do at a programmatic level. Obviously, you can log in and command the machine by yourself, but APIs are how you do it programmatically in mass. On a scale of 1 to Ethereum, how annoying is it to build for the various API protocols, responses, and structures?
It's a struggle. I could talk about this for literally hours, but I'll try to make this brief.
7 minutes.
So the way that APIs started out was with CG Miner. CG Miner had a certain standard of APIs. It was you send binary data, like very low-level data over a socket, and you get back JavaScript object notation data in a certain format. So there's some things you can look for in there to know whether the command was a success or a failure. And then from there, you kind of get to Bitmain having some what's called CGI endpoints. They're little scripts that are on the machine, and you can call them through a web interface. And then those will return certain bits of data, and they're usually structured differently, usually still JSON, but not the same information that will tell you if it was a success. Usually you'll get that from the actual web request itself. From there, it's kind of been like I think the next thing that sort of happened was Braiins went to GraphQL for a little while, which is a protocol that's really cool in that it allows you to tell the device exactly what you want. So you select a few specific pieces of data that you want, and it'll give you that back. The trouble with that is it's really hard to modify things. So if I wanted to shut down a machine, it's really, really hard. And then finally, kind of the newest thing that they're doing now is gRPC, which is a special protocol that I could complain about all day. But there's also like REST APIs, which is similar to the CGI endpoints. So Vnish does REST APIs, which is all just web access stuff. So you sign in with the web interface, and then you can send different commands to different locations there. Luxor does mostly CG Miner standard stuff, so they're following the oldest standard in place. And Braiins has a couple. Everybody uses CG Miner to some extent, but Luxor's taken it the furthest. And then Braiins has mostly gRPC now.
So you kind of...
So it's a struggle. There's a lot of different types of things. And then there's a lot of issues with what things are standardized, right? So a lot of stock firmware is going to have some commands that work and some commands that don't. Like Bitmain doesn't have any tuning, so you can't really change how much power it's using. They do have a high and a normal mode, but then that's not something you'd expect to see in like Braiins OS, where you can directly select the power usage. And then if you wanted to go from, 2400 watts anywhere between there and 3600, well, Vnish has presets, so you only get to select a certain number of those, whereas Braiins OS, it can be anywhere in between, right? So it's really complicated the way that different things aren't standardized across different firmwares.
Aren't we mixing two close but still separate things here? Because one thing is API and a standard definition of what the communication should look like, and the actual features of the firmware and the machines. Because once you don't have a standardized feature set, you can play with the communication protocol however you would like, but it doesn't solve you the trouble of controlling the heterogeneous fleet of machines, because you cannot talk to them even through the same API the same way. So you have to make the distinctions between, this supports this. This can be, okay. So the trouble is the heterogeneous, like every miner supports slightly different things. It can be because of firmware. It can be because of hardware. And
there's also...
It's not like APIs only. It would be cool if it's API only.
Yeah, no, of course it's not an API-only issue, but the struggle that I run into is, as an end user, you want standardized control across all your machines, and the way you do that is you write a program that talks to them, and then you have an API that you expose, and you say, okay, this is how you do certain things with my program, and it talks to different types of machines, right? And so even the API that you expose then is non-standard and gets really, really complicated, but that's...
Aren't you just describing PyAsic?
Sorry?
Aren't you just describing PyAsic?
That's kind of the point. That's where I get all this experience with APIs from, is building out a software that is designed to abstract that complexity away from users.
Well, I mean, it's just an issue between like WhatsMiner and Bitmain. They're both CG miner, and they have different outputs.
Yeah, and then WhatsMiner, you could look at the API commands. Anything that starts with get underscore when you're making a request is formatted completely differently. It doesn't follow the CG miner standard that they set. So even inside the same firmware, there's different standards.
Amen.
Yeah.
So
one more comment. We discussed Stratum v2. Imagine somebody goes forward and spends time with designing well thought through API. Who is gonna support it? What is the incentive for MicroBT, Bitmain, one firmware developer, second firmware developer to follow to the byte somebody else's API? And what is the incentive for that? It is a difficult thing to ask for.
I really don't think there is much incentive for them. The only incentive is if large-scale miners go, look, guys, we've been dealing with your stupidity for way too long. You have so much complexity here. Follow this standard, or we're going to go somewhere else that does.
Okay, so it's an interesting suggestion. Can you describe a situation where a large-scale miner will pick a solution for the mining operation based on supported API? Like, I cannot imagine that.
I can't either, because they're going to do the same thing I did,
I'll
just
pick
abstract.
always machines which are, the decision-making will not include API to the firmware at all. Because you can always go around writing a communication layer which translates. You can use third-party management software. You can hire people who can do the low-level communication stuff for you. It's not going to influence the 10, 100 million decisions about buying this and supporting this or installing this firmware or not. I don't see it. It would be great if such a small feature could draw the attention of the miners, but I don't see it.
This is why I like to bully these guys, because they'll actually change stuff.
So, I mean, with every day, with every month, it actually gets less and less likely because there's another operator who's developed another feature in their operation, their day-to-day operation, that's relying upon one of you guys' endpoints that if you go back and change it to standardize it, it breaks their entire operation. So, like, it's a very relevant topic, but it also kind of speaks just the nature of technology as it evolves in human systems. It's kind of messy, but it's what we got.
Yeah, like you really don't want to break other people's code. Of
no,
course.
like that that loses you business, as I understand it.
And so the way that you solve that problem is you design something that's perfect the first time, that uses nothing that anybody else is doing and works in a different spot, which is impossible. You're never doing that first try.
Exactly. So, sorry, miners. So the other topic that's very relevant to Bitcoin, the Bitcoin ethos, is about transparency. Like the blockchain is entirely public ledger. You can go audit transactions from address to address, see where Bitcoin and UTXOs have flowed. One of the components of firmware and how it's administered is dev fee. So this is a topic that's near and dear to me because how many pitches did I walk into where it's like, hey, I don't like the dev fee, right? Surprise. So for the uninitiated, the dev fee is the percentage of hash rate that firmware extracts and uses as payment. There's some details as to why it's really hard to build a firmware without a dev fee, without forfeiting your entire revenue stream, which as a developer of firmware, that's not ideal. But it's a percentage that generally ranges somewhere between 2 and 3%, depending on who has it, where it's coming from. So let's start with Goose. Dev fees represent a non-trivial amount of hash rate. How do you address concerns about like its proper administration or ethical administration?
Yeah, that's a really good question and something that we get asked all the time. I think from Luxor's end, there's a few kind of like value propositions that we provide our customers that give them a lot of peace of mind. The first one, it's the same way as we were the first mining pool to get a SOC 2 Type 2 certificate. We are the first and only firmware that has a SOC 2 Type 2 certificate as well. So that gives kind of like large miners and publicly traded miners a lot of like confidence in our development process, in how we operate, in how we keep information. There's a lot of security around that. Another thing that we do is that we store every single share that flows through a Luxor Stratum. So for all of these large miners, we can like literally give them a report of every single proof of work that came from the dev fee. We also expose an API directly through the mining pool that they can query in real time that shows how much dev fee is coming from their miners. So we have all of this information that we can provide our customers that gives them a lot of peace of mind, not only to them, but also for their auditors. So when a miner comes and uses LuxOS, we can provide all of this data that helps them kind of like address the customers, their board, and their auditors.
It's cool, but it does exactly what you said, and it is making people feel better, but it doesn't solve the inherent problem of not being able to prove that the firmware is doing what it says it's doing. Like it is very probably unsolvable problem. What you can do, SOC 2 doesn't solve it. Reporting shares doesn't solve it. It gives people better feeling, and sometimes it's enough, and it's fine. Like I like people having good feelings, but I think it's it is not completely solvable problem technically. So other option, and I think when I was first seeing that there is something like dev fee, I was, it doesn't make sense. But then it makes a lot of sense for users to be completely anonymous, not having any written agreement, you can just download the software, run it, and it works. So it's a default. I ended up understanding is a very good idea. But then, if you are a bigger miner, obviously questions are asked, and therefore we allow people to not use the fee as a licensing model, because it is useful for a lot of small miners or middle-sized miners who don't have the capacity to like make a direct deal with somebody providing the firmware service. But as you are bigger, it is possible to just have a standard license agreement for usage of the software, and then the dev fee can just go away. So both options, I think, are useful and meaningful. If I'm running a home miner at my place, I can measure the hash rate. I can see that I'm getting some uplift, and I can be completely happy with the dev fee because there is no paperwork around it, and everything just works. If I'm a public miner with 100,000 machines, then probably I have the capacity to do something smarter. And even on the firmware developer side, there are solutions just to drop the dev fee and make a standard legal agreement and the licensing agreement. So both things, I think, are perfectly useful.
That's a really good. You're next. That's a really good point. The technical limitations on providing assurances leaves room for the necessity of relationships and developing trust with your operator and firmware provider. So Mark, like, you don't have that pool available to you. How do you go about having that conversation?
Yeah, so this is something we thought about this a really long time ago. So when we came out with firmware back in the day, the business model was dev fee. We were just like, you know what, this is the only thing we could do. So we kind of came up with that whole little strategy. And then it came down to, how do people check we're taking what we check? Or sorry, how do people check they're taking what we take? So like in our firmware, for example, we show the pool. We don't say where it's going in most cases, but you can see the difficulty, the shares. You can multiply them together, do the math against your pool, and you get the dev fee. We add widgets and all sorts of stuff so people don't have to do the math. But what you're saying is correct. We don't own a pool, so there's no other way to do it. And then on top of it, you could it's firmware, right? It's code you can't see. So technically, yeah, you can make it say whatever you want it to say. But you can sniff the network traffic and you can see what's happening. But like what we have to do for large-scale clients, it's either the license model, where it's, hey, you could buy a license and not have to pay dev fee, or what it comes down to is, because we don't own the pool, and then I think it actually works out to our advantage. As like a trustless system, we can give them watcher links and API access to our pool. They can see real-time the hash rate we're taking. And there's no way we can influence because we don't own the pool. But it's funny because like back in like 2018, 2019, nobody really cared. And like auditors, you try to explain like how difficulty works, and you spend like 3 hours teaching them how Bitcoin mining works. And now it's getting a little bit easier, but it's the business changed a lot in the past like 4 years. Like, I mean, just the scale and like the checks and balances, but. Yeah, it's a little different for us. And like the license model, like you're saying, it's becoming normal.
What's a Satoshi? Brett, I have a question for you on this, because your boss, Steve Barber, has actually been pretty vocally critical of the dev fee model as kind of like extortion, basically. I'm just curious, do you have a similar take on it, or do you see the value in it and see it as fair?
I don't really have a take on it. My best take on it is, technically, it depends how well you encrypt your dev fee channel, but it could be considered a command and control channel. And so there are cases where, okay, we are a firmware provider and we want to prevent people from just proxying our dev fee back to their pool, or just blocking it somehow and making it seem like it's going to a pool but not having it show up. And the way we do that is by encrypting it somehow, or having some end-to-end information that we need to track there. And then all of a sudden, you're encrypting this data, and nobody knows what's going on with the dev fee. And so that can make things a little bit difficult. And I think that's one of the things that Steve has brought up as well.
Yeah, but I mean, are you like implying like people phone home data, or like it can?
Well, you absolutely
go back
could. I'm not saying that anybody is, but I'm saying this is the type of thing you could, in theory, do. And how do we kind of overcome that as a problem?
I mean, for the longest time, we didn't encrypt our network traffic, which the reason was transparency. You can literally look at what's happening. The downside, you could do a man-in-the-middle attack.
but I know people who have tried to do stuff like that. They'll like reach out to me and go, "Oh, how do I like proxy this?" I'm like, "Don't proxy the dev fee. First of all, that's a terrible thing to do, and second of all, like." There's a lot of cases where you just can't. Like, I had somebody try to do this with Braiins a while ago. You might know Blisk.
Yeah, good luck.
Sorry?
Good luck with that.
Yeah, it's hard.
You're completely right. And I understand the user's perspective of installing just some software on my machine, and then it opens a connection. I cannot look into it. I cannot break it. If I break it, then the firmware stops behaving as it is supposed to behave, because I'm not providing it the access to the upstream as it is part of the contract, let's say. But it is an inherent feature of this anonymous relationship. And to keep the lights on, you just have to have a way how to get the fee for running the thing. And it's not optimal. Like, me as a user, I would have exactly the same concerns, and we have the understanding for it. But other than going forward with the proper licensing scheme and dropping the dev fee channel, I cannot see a technical solution which would be close enough to how dev fee works. It is I don't know. If somebody has a technical solution, I would be the first to support it and drop the current solution with dev fee, which raises these questions. But I'm not aware of the technical solution.
I agree with you that licensing is probably the simplest initial solution to that. I'm not as familiar with LuxOS and with Vnish as I am with Braiins, but I'm curious if you guys are, how you guys are handling that.
Like licenses?
Do you guys just keep your stuff unencrypted, and if somebody proxies it, I guess you get screwed, or what?
No, it used to be that way. It used to be unencrypted, so you can actually watch the traffic and see what's happening. And then somebody, this has been fixed a while ago, but someone realized you can man-in-the-middle attack the worker name on the dev fee, and then they just register a different worker at the pool that we use. That was a huge fiasco. But yeah, we have to encrypt it. But license models, we don't openly advertise it, but if you're a big client and you need to do licenses, it's something we'll do. It's more work. Also, software as a service, download, install, run, easy. There's not a whole lot we got to do.
Yeah, so it's a trade-off between complexity and transparency a little bit.
Yeah, and then with a license server, the way ours works, say the license server's down or you can't ping it or there's an issue, then it falls back over into dev fee. If that fails, now you're turning on all the anti-piracy stuff. So there's trade-offs. I think the best model is licenses with where's Epic control boards with firmware preloaded. You don't have to. You already paid for it. You don't have to worry about anything. But
just get rid of the dev fee.
It's a pain. Oh, yeah,
Well, I have two comments there. I guess the first one is we don't encrypt the communication with the mining pool. Number one, because it's again gives more peace of mind to miners that they can see what's going on between the miner and the dev fee kind of channel. And then the other thing is licenses don't work really well with miners. Why? Because the dev fee model aligns incentives with the miners. If hash price goes up, if the miner is making a little more money, we are making a little more money. If the customer is making less money because the mining economics are worse, we are also making less money. When you have a fixed license fee, that changes the game, where you can go from, 2% dev fee up to 4 or 1, depending what's mining economics. So the customer might end up paying way more than compared to the dev fee model.
Yeah, but you're talking about only the simplest licensing model, and it is fixed fee. And you can create any contract you would like.
Of course.
Even mirroring the dev fee. It's simple.
So we're just about out of time. I'm proud of us. We joked about running out of things to talk about. I've got one more question. We'll kind of condense it into a yes/no answer. So, Pavel, Braiins somewhat infamously took down the open source for your original firmware. Is that something that you would ever reconsider revisiting, or is it just kind of not really? Yes or no?
Regular discussion topic.
Goose, would Luxor ever consider open sourcing any portion of the firmware?
Potentially.
Mark?
Yeah, we have a Rust miner we've been working on for 3 years, but we're not done.
Okay.
So that's a no for now, right?
Yeah.
That's a no for now.
I will open source the open source version of Braiins that I have a fork of, with one extra commit that I added.
Well, Brett, the question for you, actually, as the proxy miner here, would you consider foregoing features in your firmware so that you could actually have open source to review? Yes or no? We're out of time.
That's a no.
Maybe.
Maybe.
All right, everyone.
Myself personally, yes. The company, probably not.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Next year, we are bringing the Bitcoin conference to the American West, Las Vegas. The brightest minds in the world will converge to deliver Bitcoin history. Buy your tickets now at b.tc/conference/2025.